Today, we are dealing with a subject that will confuse some minds but also make them think, any means to an end is permissible. When we hear this phrase, it immediately brings a certain name to mind. Niccolò Machiavelli. You know, the man who wrote the book of strategy, known as the master of intrigue. Well, was Machiavelli really that ruthless? In other words, was he saying, as long as you achieve your goal, the rest is not important, or was there a deeper, more complex truth underlying it? Today we will try to understand this controversial concept through Machiavelli's eyes. Imagine, we are in 15th century Italy, constantly warring city-states, power struggles, and palaces full of betrayal. As he says in his book The Prince, should a ruler deceive when necessary, or should he be ruthless when necessary? Is this just to stay in power, or is it part of a larger order? Don't we sometimes encounter such approaches in today's world? Think about it, in business, politics, or maybe in our own lives. Aren't the small strategic moves we all make from time to time a bit Machiavellian? But what is critical at this point is whether the end of this path leads us to success. In today's video, we will delve into the origins of Machiavelli's ideas and discover who has used this strategic mind throughout history and the results. And of course, we will discuss how valid these ideas are today. In short, we will embark on a journey of inquiry together. If you are ready, fasten your seatbelts, because we are heading towards Machiavelli's controversial world. Let's get started. Machiavelli's world. Friends, let's go into a time warp. Close your eyes and imagine yourself in late 15th and early 16th century Italy. A time when city-states fought each other fiercely, intrigues and betrayals were in the air, and no one trusted anyone. There is a name born in this very environment, Niccolò Machiavelli. Born in Florence, this man found himself in the complex world of politics at a young age. He stepped into the political scene as a diplomat and began to swim in this sea of intrigue around him. However, life was not always rosy for him. When Machiavelli was exiled by the Medicis, the strategist in him was fully revealed at that moment. These years of exile were the period when he wrote The Prince, the work that made him history. Imagine, you are in a corner, and your career seems to be over, but he turned this defeat into an opportunity and wrote perhaps the most impressive political book in history. Machiavelli not only explained how a ruler should survive but also shed light on the darkest corners of human nature. In other words, he lived in such a period that people did not hesitate to try all kinds of ways not only for survival but also for their interests. Machiavelli took these observations and revealed in his book The Prince how a leader can protect his power and how far he can go for power. Now let's think, could someone who grew up in such an environment write otherwise? To understand Machiavelli's ideas, one must first understand his world, that chaotic period. The content of The Prince and Machiavelli's ideas. As for Machiavelli's book The Prince, this is where things get interesting. Imagine, you have a guide in your hand, but this guide does not tell you what a leader should do to be moral, just, or popular, but on the contrary, what he should do to keep power in his hands. Yes, you have not heard wrong. Machiavelli argues that a leader does not always have to do the right thing, sometimes it is necessary to lie, cheat, and even be ruthless. Because according to him, results are important, not morals. Now let's think like this. If you were a leader at that time, would you prefer to be someone who is loved and trusted by the people, or someone who pushes the limits if necessary to stay in power? It is precisely at this point that Machiavelli says in The Prince, if you want to stay in power, sometimes you have to play dirty games. That is why Machiavelli's ideas are identified with unethical and ruthless policies even today under the name of Machiavellianism. But it is also a fact that these strategies have still inspired many leaders and changed the course of history. Machiavelli understood human nature and the desire for power very well and expressed it clearly. Of course, at this point, the question is everything permissible? Comes into play, which is the real heart of our video. The main controversial part of Machiavellianism is that every means is acceptable for the result. But don't you think we should stop and think here? Is the outcome everything? Or do the values lost in this process overshadow the success achieved at the end? This is exactly where Machiavelli's indisputably impressive yet confusing world begins. Machiavelli's perspective: the ends justify the means. Now let's come to Machiavelli's perhaps the most popularized quote: the ends justify the means. So what exactly does this mean? Have you ever thought about it? Machiavelli says to a leader or manager here, look, brother, if your goal is big, do whatever you have to do on this path. In the end, they will only remember you for the success you have achieved. In other words, Machiavelli argues that a leader should not only be well-intentioned and moral, but also ruthless, decisive, and strategic when necessary. According to him, weak leaders are only a subject of ridicule. No one takes a weak leader seriously. Machiavelli says that if your goal is to strengthen the state, to increase the welfare of the people, or to prevail over your enemies, every step you take on this path is justified. Whether you lie, cheat, or resort to all kinds of tricks to defeat your opponents. This is why Machiavelli's teachings are like a result-oriented strategy book. However, this way of thinking has led to great debates in almost every period. Even today, when people say Machiavellian, they immediately think of people who are cunning, ruthless, and sometimes push ethical boundaries. But the interesting thing is that this point of view is still used in many fields. Today, in the business world, politics, or perhaps even in our daily lives, it is sometimes thought that it is necessary to push the limits for success, right? But is this true? This is where we need to stop and question, is every means justified? In other words, how far can we leave our conscience behind to achieve a goal? Machiavelli's bold approach may not appeal to everyone, but it certainly makes you think. On the one hand, everything can be done for power and success, but on the other hand, where do humanity and ethical values come into play? To seek the answers to these questions is precisely to open the door to Machiavelli's controversial world. Critique of Machiavelli: the conflict of morality and strategy. Friends, as bold and innovative as Machiavelli's ideas were, they also attracted a great wave of criticism. Many thinkers and leaders said, wait a minute, politics cannot be just about power games, it has to be about morality too. For them, leadership was not just about winning, it was about justice, honesty, and serving your people in the right way. Yes, everyone agrees that power is important, but how do you get that power? Here is the real issue. Although Machiavelli's view that the ends justify the means is a more realistic view of politics than some, there was a missing part of this point of view: ethics. Critics of his ideas said, no matter how great the goal, the way you achieve it is at least as important. In other words, it was great that the leader held power in his hands, but how he gained this power and how he used it were at least as important as the results he achieved. According to these critics, in the long run, it is possible to win the trust of the people not only through fear or strategy but also through justice and good governance. Because, at the end of the day, if leaders only seek power by any means necessary, it can create a climate of mistrust and chaos in society. A just leader not only appears strong to his people but also sets an example with his honesty, transparency, and morality. In other words, how you reach your goal determines the rules of the game as much as what your goal is. At this point, Machiavelli's ideas show us the dark sides not only of politics but also of human nature. But at the same time, it is up to us to handle these teachings correctly and to know where we should stand. So, perhaps what Machiavelli is teaching is the fine balance between strategy and morality. A leader who can achieve this balance will not only be strong but also respected and lasting. This is precisely why understanding Machiavelli's criticisms and opposing views is critical to resolving this deep conflict. Machiavelli in the modern world. Friends, let's take a look at today. Although Machiavelli's ideas were written hundreds of years ago, how valid do you think they are today? Let's think about it. Isn't this strategic way of thinking still alive, from the business world to politics, sometimes even in our daily lives? For example, when a business person takes strategic steps to stand out in the market or a politician tries all kinds of campaigns to win an election, they may be following Machiavelli's footsteps without realizing it. Think about it, in today's competitive world, it is necessary to make strategic plans to leave your competitors behind, perhaps pushing the limits from time to time. But here we face a critical question: do these strategies lead us to lasting success, or do we experience greater losses in the long run while we think we are winning in the short term? Machiavelli's strategic mind may be tempting at first because it offers a result-oriented approach. But let's not forget that every move has a price. An unethical move in the business world today may lead to a loss of trust tomorrow. When a politician tries every way to win in the short term, perhaps he loses the trust of the public in the long term. While Machiavelli's ideas show us the power of strategy, they also make us question the fine line between ethics and strategy. Perhaps Machiavelli's real teaching today is to know where to stand on the road to the goal. It is important to strategize, without leaving our values, principles, and people behind. The real success comes to those who can strike this balance. In other words, what we will learn from Machiavelli's world today is not just winning, but how we leave a mark while winning. Because at the end of the day, real success looks not only at the result but also at how we reach that result. Rethinking Machiavelli. And here comes the most important part, friends. Machiavelli's saying the ends justify the means reveals perhaps the darkest side of human nature. The magic of power, the glamour of power, the feeling of victory in achieving the goal. But wait a minute. This does not mean that it is always right to follow this strategy. Machiavelli showed us how far people will go to maintain their power, but is it always the best way? That is debatable. Sometimes, not giving up our ethical values and what we know right on the road to success can provide a more solid, more permanent gain in the long run. Think, should a leader be only result-orientated, or should he remain fair and transparent in the process? Because we know that winning also comes at a price. If that price is to give up human values, perhaps what you gain may not be as great as you think. At this point, I would like to ask you, do you think all means are permissible? Is it more important to risk everything for the sake of the goal or to protect some limits? Navigating Machiavelli's world is certainly stimulating, but it is essential to carry our compass with us on this journey. Remember, the main issue is not only to win but also to remember who we are while winning. What are your thoughts on this subject? Do you think it's better to go all the way for our goal or to know our limits sometimes? Share your comments below and let's discuss together. Because the answer to these questions is perhaps hidden in finding the true success that not only Machiavelli, but all of us are looking for.